You are going to rock the year. And we're going to help you do that here at the Elite Recruiter Podcast. We have the Rock the Year event, the Recruiting Growth Summit, kicking off on March 10th. It is going to be awesome. We're going to be focusing on mindset. We're going to be focusing on sourcing. We're going to be focusing on AI. We're going to be focusing on operations and high performance and BD and sales. Every single thing that you need as a recruiter to make sure that you can rock 2025 and make it the year of abundance. Make it the year that works for you. Make it the year that you crush every single one of your dreams. Let's go get it. Coming up on this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. For you having a successful year, what does your day-to-day look like? What does your day look like? How's it broken down?
Oh, wow. I guess I didn't mention that I'm very ADHD. So, long story short, about a month later, I went into the OBGYN. I got a biopsy, found out I had cancer, and then had to deal with that. So I was faced with three different things at one point while trying to be extremely successful with recruiting.
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast because my guest, former professional athlete, was looking for the next event, the next place where she can play. And she chose recruiting as where to learn her skills, build her skills, and play her skills. But on top of that, we're also going to talk about some of the challenges that she had to deal with. Just last year, she had to go fight cancer and also fight being paralyzed. And the crazy thing is, that was also her best year ever when it comes to billings. So we're going to talk about some of the things that she did as she was overcoming these health challenges. And these are challenges that everybody, I hope not everybody goes through, but everybody goes through challenges. It's about how you actually look at the challenge, deal with the challenge, and get through the challenge and keep on going. So that's why I am so excited to have Caitlyn on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you. What an intro. I'm excited to be on this podcast. I listen to a lot of your podcasts and learn from them. So excited to, introduce myself and tell my story.
Excited to have you. And real quick, before we do that deep dive on how you ended up in the wonderful world of recruiting, tell us real quick a little bit about what kind of recruiting you're doing and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I am a construction recruiter. I fell into that in a weird way, and I'll tell that story later. But I work for TLO right now. I work completely remote, and I absolutely love my job. So, yeah.
And you guys are a fast-growing company.
Yeah, we are. So Dante, he was actually on the podcast, I believe it was in November or December, and he started the company, and I saw his posts on LinkedIn. He is big on hosting, about the recruiting industry and getting people excited about it. And I saw that and wanted to be a part of the team. So I ended up leaving the company that I was at and going to TLO. I joined in September of 2024. So it hasn't been that long, but it's been a great ride so far.
That is awesome. So real quick, and I know we'll probably jump back into that story in talking about that, but how did you even initially end up in this wonderful world of recruiting?
Yeah, great question. I feel like everyone has a story and no one was like, yeah, I wanted to be a recruiter when I was 5. I always wanted to be a professional soccer player, and that didn't happen. I played in college, but besides the point, what happened was I actually started out bartending in college, and then everyone said, oh, you should be in sales. So I ended up getting a role at 3M, joining their team in the construction world, selling fire stop in Chicago. And so I was always out in the field, learning everything about construction, always out with the guys. And, I loved it. I fell in love with it, but I did not want to travel as much as I was traveling anymore. So in 2020, during the pandemic, I ended up applying for this recruiting job in Denver because I ended up moving there, and I got it, and it was in the construction world. So ever since then, I have been, in recruiting or in construction recruiting, and I haven't looked back since. So.
And it looks like even a few years into sales, you're also juggling being a professional athlete too.
Yeah.
How did you handle both of that?
Good question. So as a woman in professional football, we had to work full time, and play. So it was definitely a roller coaster, and I can describe recruiting as a roller coaster. So I feel like it goes hand in hand. But I would work full time during the day, and then at night we would have practice, and then on the weekends we would have games. So it was definitely a a different time. I probably couldn't do that anymore, but I did it for like almost 7 years. I played in Chicago. That was my first team. And then I played in Denver, and that was my second team that I played for. I also played rugby, but that is another story. So I played.
Another story for another day.
Yeah, I could go on about that.
Okay, so you've been around construction pretty much like your entire career, even before recruiting. You just kind of just landed in that niche and you decided to stay there because it like felt like it was good. That's kind of how I stayed in GovCon.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like construction it's always going to be there. You always need a roof over your head. You always need, like, there's always going to be new construction, new builds, all of that stuff. I mean, there's so many avenues with construction as well. I've done it all, but I'm always learning. I'm always growing and pivoting within the industry and meeting new people and learning their stories. And I just honestly love it. And I know that all recruiting is different in that aspect, but that's how I fell in love with it, and that's how I'm growing from it. So, yeah.
And okay, so I know we talked about it real quickly at the very start of the podcast, but you, like, just last year overcame cancer. Like, first of all, let me take a step back. Like, how did you even find out that you had cancer?
Ooh, so that is a good question, tough question. So in October of 2022, I went in to have hip surgery. So like I said, I played professional football, and I also played soccer in college, and my hip was bothering me for years, and I just put it off because I wanted to play the sports. I didn't want to be out as long as I would have to be out, which they said 9-month recovery. They broke my hip and had to, do a bunch of things that would be a 9-month recovery, and I just, didn't want to do it yet. So as soon as I got a remote position, I was like, okay, I'm set. I don't have kids yet. I can get this surgery. I ended up going in for surgery, and 5 days later, I couldn't feel my legs. So I kept saying something was wrong to the hospital. I was in California at the time, USC Keck. I kept saying to the nurses, the doctor, something's wrong, but, I just had a major hip surgery, so they weren't really, listening at the time. And that's when I realized you really have to advocate for yourself, and that's when that started. But yeah, I was diagnosed with extremely rare disease. It's very long. It's called MOGAD, but it's myelin oligodendrocyte glycoprotein antibody disease. So it's a mouthful, but I think a lot more people relate to MS. It has a lot of the same symptoms as MS. So I was diagnosed with that, and I was in the hospital for 34 days. At the time, I was a recruiter still, and so I was, getting on my laptop, still trying to talk to clients, doing all that stuff because I actually am so passionate about recruiting. I couldn't stop. And as soon as I got out, I was relearning how to walk. And about, since I was on the couch so much, I then found out that I had cancer because I, felt a lump in my breast. So long story short, about a month later, I went into the OBGYN, I got a biopsy, found out I had cancer, and then had to deal with that. So I was faced with 3 different things at one point while trying to be extremely successful with recruiting. So yeah, I mean, it was an insane roller coaster. That obviously is a long story short, but that's how I found out.
I'm okay. I'm trying to unpack, you had a hip surgery that you were pushing off because I hate to say this, the typical athlete, I'm just going to keep on working through the pain.
Yeah.
And then you're paralyzed and have to relearn how to walk.
Yes.
And coming from an athletic background and playing sports, how long did that process to relearn how to walk take?
So it took about 6 months total. I'm grateful that I can walk because it's not guaranteed. A lot of the people that have had this happen to them, and it's very rare, so not a lot, are paralyzed for life. And so I'm very grateful that that didn't happen to me. However, there's a lot of things that I'm dealing with still on a daily basis that, I have infusions that I have to have 2 to 4 times a month. It's called IVIG. Some people might relate to that. It's common with autoimmune diseases. And there's just a lot that could be, I could say a lot on as to how this all happened, but yeah.
Okay, so I know we were talking beforehand, back when we were scheduling this podcast and before we hit the start button, but like in my head, I was just like, with everything that you're going on, I feel like most people would be like, okay, I'm done. I can't handle anything. But you were just like, you said it was a love for the game of recruiting.
Yeah.
You were still like, calling candidates, scheduling interviews, working as a recruiter, as a commission-based recruiter.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, my drive in life, I just am very competitive. It's me versus me. It's always me versus me. I want other people, I want to be surrounded by people like me and like-minded people. And I think I had that at the time, which was great. And I still have that. I think my number one, word when it comes to recruiting is set your intentions. Always have goals, but intention. Always go back to the intention. When I was in the hospital, it's like, what are my goals? I can't have this, offset the goals that I had for the year. And I know not all the time you can, if you can't do it, you can't do it. But, I was able to in the hospital, so I did it. And I think that that's what sets me apart from a lot of recruiters is my confidence, my intentions, and my competitiveness. So
Do you think when you were in the hospital dealing with these challenges, do you think like having these like recruiting goals actually helped you heal?
yeah, honestly, I think that, and I've listened to a lot of books about this, but really having a mindset that, you're going to get through this. This isn't the end all. I think that that's the best mindset that you can have in life, in recruiting, and any kind of challenge that you're faced. It's like you have to have a positive mindset. And if you don't have that, then you're just going to, dig yourself deeper into a hole that you don't need to be in.
A lot of people, I hate to say this, when they're in school, like college and stuff, they play through school, but you studied the sports probably.
Mm-hmm.
And recruiting is your new sport. Do you look at recruiting as a game, as a sport?
Yeah, you couldn't say it any better. It is a game for me, but not a game that, I want to get better at. I want people around me to get better at. That's why I joined TLO as well, is everybody on our team is different with the process that they, that they're doing with recruiting, but their mindset is all the same. Is like everyone's driven and everyone has goals, and it's amazing to see that. And I would never set myself back in a position where I wasn't surrounded by people that had those goals,
Well, and getting around the people and getting around the growth and excitement. And, I believe getting around good people is one of the most important things that a recruiter can do in 2025.
Yeah.
Can you talk about like you joining TL and just going out of the gate?
Yeah. Well, actually, it was the scariest thing at first. So I do things and I'm not usually scared. Like I played football. I want to do things that set me apart from other people. And I don't want to ever look back on life and be like, I didn't do this. You know what I mean? And so I was able to do this. So I did that. You know what I mean? And that's why I, love recruiting. I feel like there's always different aspects of that. But how I got into TLO is I was at a smaller company and I'm glad that I learned from that. I was working remote, but it was extremely small. So what I wanted to do is be around people that could help me grow, that had the same mindset, that we could be innovative together. And I just didn't have that at my last company. So, I was very strategic on where I was going next. And as soon as I interviewed with Dante, it was like clicking, It's almost like when you have an interview with a candidate and you immediately know that this is the candidate that should be in the position for your client. You know what I mean? It was like, it was a puzzle piece. So I'm very glad that I joined TLO, great group of people. But how I got into it, it was scary at first because I was like, what if I don't succeed? You always have these doubts. But the confidence that I have in myself and, the people that I'm with, even outside of recruiting, help me and push me to be like, to not have the fear. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the most important part about like life in general. So I always want to relate recruiting to sports, life in general, and my medical experience, because that's I mean, it all plays into a role like that and why I'm successful right now. So
You actually recruited yourself for your next position almost. What did your first 30 days look like? And how did you set yourself up in the first 30 days of being at a new agency to set yourself up for success there?
So big question. That's always a grind. It's always a grind. One of those things that you can't get down on yourself for, not having clients the first day or, not having the candidates that you are wanting to send over to, your coworkers or something like that. It's like, I had all of this set up at my last company. I had my clients, I had all these candidates, all the tools, and then you pivot to another company and you have to learn their ATS system. You have to learn what their rules are and all this stuff and just make sure that you're guiding or you're in those guidelines. Well, the good thing about TLO is I learned very quickly that they'll let you do whatever works for you, which is great. I love that in the company. So what I did was, honestly, I worked my ass off day in and day out to find new clients, to learn another industry, which within the construction industry, I started in commercial roofing and commercial flooring right when I joined TLO. So still within the construction industry, but totally different than what I was doing in the past. So I learned that industry. And for me, what I do is market research like no other. And how I do that is now a little bit of AI mixed with Google. So I use AI a lot, asking questions, never be afraid to ask questions. So just honestly, putting my nose to the ground and doing what I know to get those clients and get my candidates over and making sure I have good relationships. And that's what I did the first 30 days and it worked. So yeah, just grinding.
The secret is grinding.
Yeah, honestly, it is.
I know you had a really rock star first, 21 days, first 30 days there. You ground hard. How are you setting yourself up to keep that momentum to hit your goals in 2025?
Yeah, another good question. So recruiting is always a roller coaster. I will say that every day, every hour. So, you can't ride the high and you can't ride the lows. So what I mean by that is, some people will place somebody and just, ride that high for a week, and you can't do that. You have to pivot. You have to, turn to the next thing that's going on and fill that next position, or else you'll fall behind. And so for me, it's always, like you said, always grinding, and always, I will say this over and over again, setting intentions. Make sure that you're always looking at your goals and, what is it that you need for the end of the year and what the increments that are in between to hit those goals to the end of the year. You know what I mean? So my biggest thing is, you have all these feelings of emotion when you have 3 placements in one day and then next week is crickets. It's just making sure that you don't let that get to you. And I'll always have that mindset because I did that with my, cancer and with football and with, soccer and all of that. It's just always keeping your head forward. And, what do they say? I'm always bad at quotes. Is it head down, eyes up or something? I have no idea. Don't quote me on it.
So I know you got some really big goals this year. For you having a successful year, what does your day-to-day look like? What does your day look like? How's it broken down?
Oh, wow. I guess I didn't mention that I'm very ADHD. So, so one thing that I do is always set, blocks out for sourcing and, little tiny goals at a time. I think that's the best way that I work. Obviously, everyone works differently, but the goals that I have and how I get there is making sure it's day to day, week to week, month to month, and meeting those goals every week, every day, every month, in order to get to the end goal. So for me, it would be how many quality subs can I get out to my clients that week? And how many interviews out of those subs? And it's just about all the data that is involved with that and making sure that, if this didn't work this week, what can I do the next week and pivot from that to ensure that I, hit my goals for that week. So, I mean, if I described my day to you, you would be like, oh my God, it probably wouldn't make any sense. But I'm sure recruiters definitely understand. It's just a lot of chaos, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of phone calls, a lot of babysitting, and a lot of, learning and growing from, my calls, clients, all that stuff. It's just every single day I'm learning and growing from every single call. And I mean, in a nutshell, that's how I structure my days and weeks.
So, and I know like you're just talking about like, hey, had 3 placements come in on like, 3 fills on a Friday, then working for some more stuff. What is working for business development right now this year?
Oof. I love business development. Well, I love all recruiting, but business development has been a lot of in person this year. So my goal this year is to meet all of my clients in person. And I have so far met all of my clients in person since I've been at TLO, which is awesome. So this year, going to a lot of conventions, but setting up appointments, making sure that it's not going in blindly, So my goal for business development is never stop recruiting or never stop being on the business development side, because, you're always going to you're never going to have like the numbers that you need if you don't have the clients, you know what I mean? If you don't have the recs to fill. So, my goal is to set myself apart from all the other recruiters, making sure that I am being more of a consultant than just, a resume sender. I want to know their urgent needs, fill that, go on to the next. And, that's what I make sure that I set that intention at first and set that goal and let them know that that's, what you'll get out of me when I am working with you. So, I mean, that's just how I go about business development. I'm actually going to the recruiting or the IRE, which is the roofing expo, in a couple weeks. Very excited about that. Already have some interviews set up, coffee, lunch, my 2 words that I love to say. But yeah, I'm excited for this year.
So a lot more in person, even though you're working in a remote world.
Yeah. Well, I'm a very social person. So, I can only stay in this seat for so long before I get antsy. I can't believe that I'm actually working remote. It is something that I personally love, but it's very different than what I ever thought I would be doing because I'm so social. But I think a lot of recruiters are social. So they might feel the same way I do. It's just like antsy in my seat.
That's funny. But so it sounds like the big differentiator this year is going to be when it comes to BD, like actually seeing all your customers, seeing your clients and showing your face.
Well, what's crazy is, I've met a couple of people that said that they never have met a recruiter in person. And I think that's mind blowing. A lot of recruiters, especially, I work all across the United States. So, I'm in Arizona right now and I have clients in Massachusetts, and so what I'll do is I'll set up a time, have, 2 or 3 meetings and fly out there and go meet them and make sure that it's very intentional. Make sure it's not just, what are your current needs right now, but in the future, I want to be a partner. I know that people say that all the time, but I truly believe that that's how you get your best clients. And that's how you make the best relationships, is actually being a partner and staying true to your word, because in recruiting, there's a lot of us and you have to really set yourself apart. So, yeah.
I love that. Like, even though you said it was Denver, right?
Well, I've been at a lot of places, but I'm in Arizona now, but I was
Arizona. Sorry.
Yeah.
Arizona, but you're still flying to customers on the East Coast to actually go have those in-person meetings. So that way they remember you and not the 75 other firms.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think, you have to set yourself apart in this industry. And I thrive off, people. Like, that's why I literally work with people that's our job, is we are people, this is a people industry. So it's like no brainer. Go out, fly, meet them. What's the investment of flying out and meeting your customer in person, your client in person, is a no brainer. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, the investment, $500 round trip to go meet, your client, shake their hand, get to know them. It's so much different than just a Teams meeting, And I think that every single client I've had come back to me, and saying the same thing is like, I'm not trying to be like to my own horn or anything, but they said that I'm the best recruiter that they've worked with because of that. And not just because of that, but it builds a great relationship, So, yeah.
Before we jump over the quickfire questions, I kind of want to go back to like the sports mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And like, is there anything else that you've picked up from the sports world that you've kind of like built into your internal tool chest that you're using in the recruiting space?
Everything. Yeah, everything. So my coworkers and anybody that's ever been around me, my fiance, he thinks I'm like, I love recruiting so much and I have such a passion for it because I translated all of the sports competitive passion that I had for all the sports that I've ever played, into recruiting. And it's very competitive. We have a lot of people that, are going after the same clients. And it's like, who can be better than the other person? Who could deliver first? All this stuff. And it's like, I don't want to just put numbers up though. I want to be the best that I can be to, deliver the people that I need to deliver and be the best partner. And I think that that is something that is the competitive nature in me. And it's definitely driven from sports. I played soccer when I was like 2 years old on to college. I played, I think, every sport that you can ever imagine except basketball because I'm 5'2". So I definitely wasn't good at that sport. But yeah, I tried every sport. But, I was always competitive before I had everything happen to me. But even now, more so, just because the reason behind me, being successful and all that stuff I have a lot more reason to it. I want to leave, I know this sounds cliche, but I want to leave behind a legacy. I want to, invest in certain things. And the only way I could do that is to make more money within the industry. And to do that is to start with the small goals, build relationships. How do you get there? And that's what I was doing with sports is like, you don't just, you could be naturally good at something, but you have to build on to that. And you always have to learn new things or you'll be left behind. And that is really like, it goes hand in hand, sports and recruiting, always learn, always be curious and learn, grow, all the good stuff.
And you kind of like joked around about being naturally gifted. And I know there's some athletes out there that I constantly always hated because I just had to go. I was the one that had to go run 90 miles a week. But like you also mentioned that like you started when you were 2. So years compound, even when
yeah,
years of effort compound, even if you started definitely at the age of 2.
Yeah, as soon as I was walking, I had a soccer ball. And I love the sport. I couldn't imagine my life without it. But, things happen in life and you just have to, I've said this a million times. I have like 5 words that really help me with life in the industry, and pivoting and growing are 2 of the words that I just have to always use because it's true. And, if you, especially with, I know that there's certain tools and everything now that there's so many tools now, but you always have to like learn new tools, learn how to be the best that you could be, or else you're going to fall behind. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, before we jump over to the quickfire questions, I know we cover a lot, like the health challenges that you had to overcome, the drive that you have from the sports world that you've taken into the sport of recruiting. Is there anything else that you want to kind of recap, cover, or talk about?
I feel like I said, I'm very ADHD. So if you asked, or if I would probably go on a tangent. So not right now. Honestly, I would always want to give advice to people in this industry is like, and if you're going through anything, I talk with people every single day that, there was a guy that I had a pre-screen with yesterday and his mom was in the hospital. And, it's like you have these conversations. These are real people. We're dealing with people every single day. It's like, you don't know what people are going through in their lives. I know a lot of people make up stories and all this stuff like with recruiting and all this, but you never know what someone's going through. And I would just say like, give people grace because you just never know. Everyone's going through something. So that's just what I would want to add.
Awesome. Well, jumping over to the quick fire questions, they don't need to be quick answers, which I'm sure you know that by now. So let's just say you're sitting down with somebody that's about ready to jump into recruiting. They jumped in, it's the first month in. They come to you asking, based on everything that you've done, what advice would you give me to win in this career?
Yeah. So a lot of people get discouraged, especially when they first start recruiting. I would say the first year is the most crucial for a recruiter. And it also depends where you are. I mean, all agencies and, everything's different with recruiting. But what I would say is the advice I would give is you're going to have ups and downs. And I've said this before, it's always a roller coaster. You're going to have 3 wins and you're going to have 3 losses in a day. You're going to have somebody not show up for their interview, even though you've held their hand. But, it's just stick with it. Remember the goals that you have and never give up. And I know that sounds cheesy, but fail forward. That's another thing that I love to say is you're going to fail in this and you're going to fail hard. But, you have to keep your head down and keep grinding or else, especially in the agency world, it's just, you're not going to make it.
And for somebody that's been in recruiting for we'll say 5-10 years, they're chatting with you what advice would you give to them? Somebody that's been in the game for a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, one, I would want to talk with them about if there's anything I can learn from them first. And then, because I always want to ask questions. I would say another thing, don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that's one thing that people don't do enough because they're scared that it's a dumb question. I mean, nothing's dumb. You just have to ask the questions. But if I were to talk to a more senior recruiter, I would say, advice I would give them is never stop learning. Don't get stuck in your old ways because this industry is, growing at a rate that it's never grown this fast, and there's so many recruiters out there and there's a lot of AI now. And, I know that 30 years ago, if you didn't learn computers, then you didn't have a job, and now it's the same thing with AI. It's going to be the same thing. It's only going to get more aggressive. I would say, pay for that ChatGPT $20 a month. It's a good investment. And I know that some people are like, well, I want to be, personable and all this stuff. Well, to be honest, it still is. It's just a different form, a more efficient way of recruiting, and using the tools that you have. I would say that would be my advice.
Just real quick, don't get started on their $200 a month version.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, no. But honestly, I'm like a numbers kind of person where it's one of those things where it's like, okay, does it make sense for this investment? Like, what is the $200 version? And now we got to talk after this about that.
I had it actually building a list in my ATS for me.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Anyways, that's another day for another podcast episode. Talking about tools, do you have actually a favorite recruiting tool that you love?
Yeah. So, the basics, I could say all day, like LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, all that stuff. But recently, ChatGPT has been a great source. The reason why is because, I do pay for the $20 a month one and it remembers what you have been doing. You know what I mean? So it's like, do you need to submit somebody to a client? It will make the submittal perfect. And, it knows exactly how you have done it in the past. So then it will, make it so that it copies basically exactly what you need to know for the future, or it needs to know for the future. Another thing is magical AI. I just started using that. It's actually awesome. But I know in the next couple of years, it's probably going to be all integrated together. But right now, there's like 10 different tools that I've used with AI, and I'm tweaking it right now. So ask me in about a couple months, I'll probably know a little bit more about what I really like using. But ChatGPT, magical AI, top 2 tools outside of like the basics of Indeed, LinkedIn, and all that good stuff. So
awesome. Do you have a favorite book that's had a huge impact on you?
So, side note, I don't read books. I listen to books. So
that counts as the same.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are the same as me I love to take walks. And when I do walk, I listen to audibles. My top 3 books would be Power of No, and then Atomic Habits, and then Own Your Day, Own Your Life. So those are books I've listened to multiple times. I can listen to them over and over again, and it always pumps me up. gets me motivated, resets my, drive to like own the day. And, it's very motivating. I love motivating books, self-help books, all that good stuff. So,
You said a few times that you've always been competitive, and that's kind of like baked in your DNA.
yeah.
Is like, and it's helped you win in a lot of places. And, you got some great big goals this year. Where do you think you got that competitive nature from at your core?
I'm not really sure, honestly. Good question. So I think it was just because it's weird because none of my family is like this. My mom never played sports. My dad was like a wrestler or something. I don't know. My brother is a software engineer for Apple. So it's like I am the only one in my family that is like this. They probably think I'm crazy. It has to be somewhere down the line genetically. But I started playing sports at a very young age. My mom just like threw me into as many sports as I could possibly handle. And from that age, I just wanted to be the best and the best version of myself. And, I love being on a team. I actually call my coworkers teammates. It's funny when I do that. I'm like, oh, coworkers, but it's just, I don't know. I don't know how I got that. I just know that the sports and the drive that I had to be, a college soccer player, a professional football player. I always wanted to compete at the highest level. And, I want to do it with recruiting too. It's something within me. And, I think that it definitely sets me apart from a lot of people, but I don't know if there's a right answer to that question.
If you want to get laugh, I'm on the board for my HOA, and half my emails, I just say like team. Hey team. All right, guys, let's get this done. Hurry up. Recruiting is a roller coaster. How do you get yourself through those hard days or those hard weeks? And I mean, you had hard months also.
Yeah. So to be honest, and I said this before, I'm in pain every single day. So it's like, I think to me, it's more of a distraction sometimes, work is, and it could be a good or bad thing. But for me, I think of it as a good thing. I always try to look at the positives. I think that I always try to learn from every single thing that happens, no matter if I'm, recruiting for a CDL driver or a CFO. It's, learning from that and growing and making sure that you understand, what the client wants, what the candidate needs, all of that stuff. It's going down to the basics to hit your goals and getting through all of that. And, the roller coaster of recruiting is highs and lows. But like I said, don't ride the lows and don't ride the highs or else you'll fall behind. And I think that is what gets me through, is just making sure that I'm always sticking to the positives and the goals that I have set. And, surrounding myself with teammates that are amazing coworkers, or whatever you want to call them. But, making sure that you are putting the energy into what's going to make you hit those goals. You know what I mean? And not wasting your energy into something that doesn't matter. Like, okay, this person fell off. What are you going to do? You're going to move forward and see what you can do better the next time and learn and grow from that. And then that's what makes you, better at recruiting.
Take a step back, like, fast forward after soccer, after college, after, working the sales position, you got into the recruiting world. Let's maybe picture yourself a month in. You've been smiling, you've been down, you're doing exactly what they tell you to do. But if you had the chance, knowing everything that you know now, to sit down with yourself at that point in time, what would you tell yourself?
So at my first recruiting position,
At the very beginning of your recruiting career.
I would say it's not always going to be like this. My first recruiting position was, like I said, it was old school, the way that they were doing things. I got out of it, and got into a recruiting role where I had a lot more, say and doing things the way that I want to do things more. It was more, newer age. I do still cold call and all that stuff, but, I wasn't able to text my candidates. I had very strict rules, and now it's like, I would just say that you're learning from this. It's an experience. This is how you got into recruiting. And, in the next 4 years, you're going to be extremely successful and you're going to meet a lot of great people. And you're going to go through a lot of crazy stuff, but, just keep your head up. That's really what I would say is like, I've said this a million times, keep grinding.
Well, I mean, let me ask you about your health scares that you had to overcome. Like knowing what the other side looked like.
Yeah.
If you had a chance to talk to yourself beforehand, like before you went all through that, is there anything that you would tell yourself?
It's so weird because when you're in it, you don't think about anything else but surviving. So, that's a hard question. It's like, I don't really have anything that I would just tell myself in that time, because when you're in a surviving mode with I was paralyzed, I had to relearn how to walk. I had cancer. I had a hip surgery, so my hip was broken in half. So I had to relearn how to walk in 2 different ways. So it was really like one step at a time, literally. And, I had a passion for sports, and I honestly will never, ever be able to play again. And it's okay. Things happen. Life happens. You have to move forward. That's what I told myself at that time. And that's what I would still tell myself now. And that's what I tell myself with every single thing that happens now, because I've been through a lot, and this is only my story. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen around me other than that as well, but that'd be another podcast. But yeah, I would stick to what I said when I was going through it, is just keep moving forward day by day. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, let me just, you're very team focused, which I think is amazing. And I'm sure Dante loves that too. But when it comes to I'm sure you get asked questions like, hey, you crushed it your first month. Like you did this, you've done that, you're doing this. You got recruiters probably asking you like, hey, what are you doing? Like this or that, or tell me like how you're doing business development. Is there a question that you wish they would actually ask you when it comes to winning or recruiting? And what would be that answer?
So, a lot of people ask me like, how are you getting clients? Like, sometimes I have a lot of success and they see it, so they'll ask me. And, what I'm doing is I'm seeing what works at this moment. And if it works, I'm using it and I'm going with it. If it doesn't, I'll pivot and do something else. But right now, I would say a lot of like LinkedIn and, picking up the phone, calling, all that stuff. People aren't really on their phones 24/7, especially in the construction industry. They'll read a text or they'll read a LinkedIn message, but they won't pick up the phone. And so I think that you have to really know your industry. And, people are always asking me, like, how did you like word this and all this other stuff? And it's just like, it's always so different. So what I would say is, be malleable with like what you're doing and always do market research. I don't know if this actually answers your question, but I'm just thinking of like all the things that help BD. And, I've talked to people that not just on my team, but in general that are stuck in an old school recruiting way. And it works a certain way. And if it works for you, that's great. But, in this day and age, I sound old. People aren't on their phones 24/7. They're looking at text message, and that's fine. If that wasn't the way that you were doing it 20 years ago, so be it. But, you learn, grow, just listen and try to use it. If it doesn't work for you, then do your old school stuff. I don't know if that answers any of your question, but.
Old school stuff. I see how it is. I've been in the game for like 2 decades now.
Yeah, well, I mean, it works, still. I mean, you just gotta, be intuitive. Really, you gotta know what you're dealing with. And I would say, like I said before, just ask a ton of questions. Like, if it's working for someone, ask them questions. Because, on my team, that's what I love about TLO too, is like, everyone works so differently. And if someone's having success in certain areas, I'm like, what are you doing? I want to know. And then I learn from that and, I make it my own.
Awesome. Well, Caitlyn, I just want to say thank you for coming on. And before I let you go, 2 quick questions. First of all, if somebody wants to follow you, how do they go about doing that?
So on LinkedIn, it's Caitlyn Jo Burke. So it would be Caitlyn Burke. And then I work at TLO. And then for Instagram, Caitlyn Burke. So it's not very hard and everything's all the same. So CAITLINJOBURKE. And I would gladly connect with anybody in the construction industry or anybody in the recruiting industry. Any questions you might have or any advice that you might give me, or if you relate to anything that I've said, I am all about like connecting with those kind of people. So good energy, only good energy.
So only good energy.
Yes.
If you got good energy, connect. We covered a lot. Like we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to leave the listeners before I let you go?
I would say within my journey, like it's just been, I mean, it's been hard. It's not easy. Like, you know, it's not all, what do they call it? Sunshine and rainbows. But, you know, I don't think life is easy. There's nothing easy about it. And if this was easy, then everyone would be doing it. Recruiting's not easy, especially agency recruiting. It's a grind. I think that I've said that word so many times that you could be rich off of it, but it's true. And, you know, I just want people to know that if I could do it, they could do it. I've had so many different obstacles in my life. And also, if you're able to do it, do it. You know, I would say don't be afraid of things that scare you because, you know, what's on the other side, you never know until you challenge yourself and see. So, yeah, that's what I would tell people.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. Like people deal with challenges. Challenges is part of life. It's going to come at you no matter what you're doing. And everybody's challenges are different. For you, you had the challenges of having to have your hip broken, an autoimmune disease that actually left you paralyzed. And then after that, had to fight cancer.
Yeah.
And you still got back up and you kept on pushing and kept on living.
Mm-hmm.
So I know when it's hard, when you're in those challenges to think about like when it's going to end, but focus on the end, focus on the next goal and focus on keep driving. And you know what? That is the way to make 2025 the most amazing year yet.
I agree. I'm excited.
All right. Until next time, guys. Thank you.